Delno Saluskin, second vice president. John George, third vice president. Jeannie Louie, secretary, here. Sharon Gowdy, treasurer.
Here.
Taylor Alvick, assistant secretary. Is there anyone on that I didn't hear? Mel, Delno, John, Taylor?
Taylor's on.
Okay. So with that, we do have a quorum with 4 officers present.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, could you open us up in a good way, if you don't mind?
Okay, certainly.
Thank you.
Dear gracious Lord, today we ask your divine blessings upon this meeting. We also ask that you hear our heart as we pray for a healing of our people and our lands. In particular today to our brothers and sisters of the Southwest. Oh dear God, that you would just rain your healing upon everyone, and that you would bless our families, and that you would give us wisdom to make good decisions that would help our people, and that you would guide us and light our path every way we turn to keep us in the direction that you would have us go. And oh dear Lord, we give you praise and thanks for all the things that your hands have provided. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, we
Back up, I'll head up to the clinic.
Okay.
let's see here. Let me get back to my. Okay, Terry, looks like we have legislative update, health board, the census still on. Maybe working off the old agenda.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so Brian's with us. Brian Gunnan's with us this morning. So Brian, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Terry?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is well. Kind of weird times here in the DC area. Probably it is in other cities where people might be dialing in also, but hope everyone is safe and is able to steer clear of any of the riot afflicted areas. It's just yeah, it's really something. But a few things really since the last call, and I wasn't able to make the last call that I was on, but I think a few things just over the past week that I was going to highlight. The House late last week passed a bill called the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. This was a very similar version of a bill that the Senate tried to pass the week before by unanimous consent. The bill number is HR 7010. Basically makes various tweaks to the Paycheck Protection Act program, generally removing certain more onerous restrictions and giving a little bit more flexibility to the users of the program. It would allow small businesses 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks to spend the loan funds. It would also, eliminate some of the limitations on how the loan money is spent in order to make the program more accessible to the hospitality industry, like local restaurants and hotels. And the bill would also require that a lower percentage of the money be used to be spent on payroll in order for the loan to be forgiven, and allows the recipients of the loans and more money on things like utilities, rent, and other business expenses. So that passed 417-1, and the Senate is expected to take up the bill and pass it this week, assuming they can get unanimous consent on the bill, but that's widely expected. So sort of, again, a legislative vehicle relating to COVID. It's a very discrete bill. It doesn't really affect any other provisions of the CARES Act or the previously enacted stimulus bills. It really just focuses on the Paycheck Protection Program.
Crazy about fried chicken? Make it healthier.
So watch for that this week.
Easier for you and your family. With the new Panasonic air frying microwave oven.
Were you getting mom here?
Getting some audio.
What happened in 1968 with
I have no idea who
our
that
country
is.
mired in Vietnam.
Hang on just a minute, Brian.
And you look at what's happening today. I mean, this isn't happening in a vacuum. We are under an immense amount of
Sounds like it went away.
Yeah, I'm not hearing it.
Terry, should I keep going?
Looks like she's still working on it.
Oh,
Let's see
okay.
here. Hold on, here she is. We ready to go, Terry?
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Continue, Brian.
Sure. I guess that one of the other things I wanted to mention was you may have seen late Thursday, the Treasury Department posted updated FAQs on expenditures under the COVID relief fund. So your folks, if you haven't seen those, they're on the Treasury's website under the FAQ link, and you'll see that it was updated on May 28th. Basically, the updated FAQs add several new questions and answers regarding eligible expenditures and administration of the coronavirus relief funds. It didn't modify or delete any of the previous FAQs that had been on the website that we'd all, or many of us, have looked at, but it did add some new provisions. They talk about things like, I'm not going to go through the entire list, but certain topics that are addressed, including using the funds to cover hazard pay and increasing solid waste capacity. It basically provides that the funds may be used for expenditures related to the government's administration of fund payments. It also talks about loans. If a government is going to be using the relief funds to provide loans to recipients, sort of how those would be administered. Talks a little bit about broadband in the context of a broader FAQ, and it mentions with regard to broadband that the funds may only be used to expand rural broadband capacity to assist with distance learning and telework if those expansions are necessary for the current public health emergency. So that may not really change much, but it's worth looking at. So again, on Treasury's website, the May 28th updated FAQs, you're probably going to want to have your controllers or CFOs or whoever is in charge of kind of cataloging this information, keeping it handy, take a look at it. And I guess just the final thing I was going to mention is that things are looking a bit closer to normal than they were, I guess, the last time I was on the call. The House late last week, Majority Leader released a revised schedule for the House for the remainder of the year. So it's a modified, they basically updated the schedule that had been previously released to deal with the realities of COVID. And so the House is going to be in session 16 days over the next couple of months, right up until the August recess. And so, there will be some votes that are expected to be held. Mostly next month. There's only 3 or 4 days of votes at the end of June, towards the end of June, that are scheduled, but much of the work will be next month. And on the Senate side, there's yet to be it sounds like any negotiation in earnest on or at least public rather, on sort of a COVID, the new COVID relief package, but I understand that the kind of lower level talks are ongoing on that. When I mentioned things looking a bit closer to normal, the Senate is expected as early as this week to consider a lands bill, ironically enough, and called the America's Great Outdoors Act. This is a bill that would reauthorize the Land and Water Conservation Fund permanently and establish a new fund for some backlog maintenance and on interior related facilities, including Bureau of Indian Education. It's a bill that's got widespread support, and I guess the read would be that the Senate Majority Leader is looking maybe not only to give a couple of senators in tough races a bone, if you will, but also do something bipartisan. So again, things looking a little bit closer to normal, at least on paper. And I guess, Terry, that's what I've got. So if folks have questions, I'd be happy to address them. Yeah.
Hey, Brian, Bill Isle here. Just as I understand it, with the updated FAQs, Daniel Kowalski explained it a couple times, different sessions, that you can use federal dollars now to match for FEMA grants. So using your COVID dollars to match that for the 25%. I know that was a big sticking point for a lot of folks. But Dan explained it twice, and I reread the FAQs a couple times, and I guess that's not explicitly clear, but it is. You could read it that way. So I'm taking it that way myself, but I don't know if others are looking at that. The other thing is that the HEROES Act, as I understand it, is set up to extend funds until they're expended instead of having the statutory limit that we now have with our COVID dollars. So, and one thing I was hoping we could do is get some energy to extend the dollars that we have now beyond the end of the year, because it's a huge challenge to try to come up with the formula to meet the kind of a moving target. It seems like they move the finish line every time we get close to, hey, well, this is a good program. Maybe we can help our tribal members with, or something like that. So I think they keep, you know, it's a marathon, I know, and they keep moving the finish line. So.
No, that's a good point. I know that I've gotten various inquiries from folks about whether funds can be obligated or must they be expended in order to avoid having to return the funds. I mean, obviously, it's a pertinent question for tribes who are doing construction, because not only are you dealing with the realities of you know, winter, you know, if it's an early winter or weather-related construction delays, but also, you know, just the availability of contractors towards the end of the year as things start to open up again. So I'm actually working on that for a couple of folks I work with, trying to suss out that question. I will say that the updated FAQs towards the end in the administration of funds section does provide a little bit of clarity as to how the funds will be treated, at least for purposes of some of the federal regulations. You know, it makes clear that they're not considered grant funds, and some other, I think, pertinent clarifications for folks who are inventorying all this stuff. So I'd encourage folks to take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. You're talking about construction related things. If you're going to do a COVID related expansion of your facilities so you can achieve some social distancing, by the time you get you know, get a construction contract, I guess hopefully by the end of the year to build something, you're obligated, but you haven't spent that money. And so one of the thoughts I had is just buy a whole bunch of portables and splash them all around. You know, that'd be one solution. That's a quick and easy solution, but it's probably not the most desirable solution. We were overloaded in every office already, and so now return to work is going to be extremely difficult. And so I think that you know, it's a huge challenge, and hopefully do you think Congress could do an amendment to extend that?
I mean, I think they certainly could. I think the challenge would be, you know, at this point is getting the majority in the Senate to agree. I think it would probably need to be done as part of some additional assistance to state and local governments, which the Senate majority has seemed disinclined to want to look at this point, at least. But I suspect that if nothing were to happen in terms of the CARES Act relief funds as it's been enacted now, I would have to think that if a number of states are in a position of having construction projects or having some of the potential to give back money that could otherwise be used, but for, you know, some of these technical issues, that there would be some year-end, maybe post-election relief. I would have to think that would be in the cards, but, you know, at this point, it's just too early to be able to predict.
So it's kind of a risk-based decision, but the other thing that's happening, I see, is some tribes are just dispersing the money on a general welfare basis, and we're still waiting for TTAC and the Treasury to kind of come around with something. But we've started our GWE quite extensively, and but we're looking at expanding that as well, so we can deliver direct services And then I suppose if that gets reversed somewhere in the process, we'd have to pay it all back.
Bill? Hey, Bill, how
Yeah,
far
Tom.
down the road are you on your modular idea?
We're just getting pricing. Yeah, we're just getting pricing right now. So, yeah, we don't know.
All right, maybe I'll reach out to you. Maybe I think that's probably a good idea given coming out of this COVID thing. We're in the same boat. We don't have enough office space for all our employees now. So that's probably not a bad idea. Thank you.
No, I think it's a short-term solution, but the money's there, and you got to give it back if you don't spend it. So, you know, I guess in many ways it's a good problem to have, but it's a problem.
Bill,
All right.
Henry.
Oh, go ahead, Henry.
Bill, are you going through FEMA on your modulars? Because we're going through FEMA on water and sewer. Our department is doing the same thing, but we're going through FEMA.
Yeah, Henry, I'm not certain of exactly where. We haven't gone that far, but if you could send me your the numbers you got from FEMA, see what you're getting.
Well, there is no numbers; it's reimbursement.
It's a reimbursement, full reimbursement, but you got your match.
Well, and that's the part where still, like you were saying earlier, is that we were promised by the state of Washington for 100% recovery. I don't know whatever happened to that thought, Leonard. And when we first started this, we went with the state because they told us it was 100% reimbursement. So we went down that state path with FEMA. And we still haven't got a clarification from the governor's office on whether that 100% is still going to apply or not.
Yeah, I think we're still waiting for some of that communication to come back from the governors and from the, yeah, so.
So Leonard, I think we still need a letter to the governor on this 100% reimbursement.
I'll check on it. I know there was that some kind of verbal, or there was a message back that they were waiving it.
Yeah.
But I guess it's never came in writing, so.
Yeah, so we just want to, that's why we chose to go down that state path. If not, we could have just went right to the feds.
Was the feds going to waive it? Or will they waive it?
No, because when it first started, the word was that the state was reimbursing us 100%. And then all of a sudden it shifted into nobody seemed to know where that came from, but it came from the governor's office. So I think we need to circle around and find out more about what their commitments was when we first started this, because a lot of us went down that state path.
So Henry, well, we got you on there. I got a bits and pieces of this, but did you lose one of your elders?
Yeah, it was our chief just last night at 5:30. And
well, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he was one of the people that kept our language alive. So he was one of the, one time at Lum, we only had 2 people that spoke the language, and he was one of them, and he kept our language alive. So we all locked to him. It's my mother's nephew. Hello.
Okay.
I'm sorry to hear that, Henry.
Yeah, I was on. I come in earlier, late. I'm sorry. Some of the elders were calling me, so I ended up coming in a little bit late. So I do got a question though for Brian. Did the second round information get extended, or what's the status of the second round?
Yeah, I saw there was a notice that it was extended, I think, through the end of last week, I think. I'll need to check my email again, but I know it sounds like most tribes got there, just from what I understand, most tribes got their information in by the original deadline. So I don't know what the rationale for the extension was, but I'm sure there was a good reason.
Is there talk about more? I'm hearing bits and pieces about more lawsuits. Have you heard anything like that?
I mean, I've read some. I'm just anecdotally being on calls and hearing folks express displeasure about various methodology allocations, not on the relief funds per se, but on other distribution of CARES Act funds. But I haven't seen anything yet. But I haven't really been watching it for it super closely though.
Delano, did you have a question for Brian? Let me see if Delano's.
There, he's muted.
He raised his hands, it looked like.
Yeah, but I can't get him off mute.
No, okay. Well, I'll have one more for Brian. The limit for PPP is still 500, as I understand it.
I don't have the bill in front of me, but that's consistent with my reading of it.
Yeah.
Okay, Delano, are you there?
Delano, are you there?
Put it in the chat box, Delano, and I'll try and I'll look for it there. Any other questions for Brian? Okay, thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
And next we have Laura Platero from the Health Board. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning. I'm going to try again to show my slides. I've been trying every week, and let's see if I can do it this week. See if I can get it to work. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I don't know why I can't do it. It's just, hold on. Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna waste time. For some reason, it just says host disabled attendee screen sharing, and it won't let me do it. And I've done it on other calls, but for some reason, I can't seem to get it to work on this one.
Hey, Laura, I'm on my phone. I'm going to switch to my computer and see if I can open that up for you. If you want to, if you.
Oh yeah, if you would, can I send it to you?
Okay.
Can I send it to you?
Yeah, you could do that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
It's James, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sending it to you now. That would be great. I apologize. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and start talking. I just sent it to James, so he should be able to open it up for me. What I just wanted to start off with, well, first, good morning to everyone, and to give you an update on the data. So I'll just share the national picture, which isn't in my slide set, and then share more specifically what's going on in our area. We are concerned the cases have increased since the last time I reported to you, pretty significantly, but let me just start with the national picture. We have 11.2 thousand cases across Indian country, with of course Navajo having the highest cases of 6.2 thousand. So that's obviously it's really, really high, and that has, their numbers have drastically increased. So of course that's really concerning. Most of the Southwest, of course, has been significantly impacted, with Phoenix and Albuquerque right up there as well. So I wanted to also just talk about our area, and hopefully if James can pull those slides up for me, you'll be able to see the picture more clearly. But since May 21st, so the period May 21st to May 31st, the number of cases in Idaho have increased by 19. So we were at 39 and the cases increased by 19. In Oregon, same thing, from May 21st to May 31st, there's 19 cases more in Oregon. So now Oregon is up to 51. And then in Washington, the cases in that same period are up by 49. So up to 250 now in Washington. So that is very concerning. That's a significant increase, obviously, in that short period of time. So, and you know, right now contact tracing is so critical, isolation and quarantine. And I actually wanted to ask you all too, if you have the resources you need with the cases that are being identified in your community to isolate and quarantine any individuals that you obviously become aware of that are positive. And I just wanted to see how we do have resources at the board to assist with contact tracing. And with every person that's contacted, it reduces the chance of it spreading by 50%. So I think contact tracing right now is absolutely critical. And seeing these numbers grow is really, really concerning. I don't know, is James, did you get my slide set up to see if he could pull it up? Okay, I don't hear him. The other thing that we have to report to you since my last presentation is we very sadly and unfortunately have 3 additional people who have passed from Washington tribes. So now there's a total of 10 people that we've lost among our Washington tribal members. And yeah, we just really don't want to see those numbers at all. So just wanted to share that. And then let me see if there's anything else. Well, oh, there he goes. So this was just my first slide, and this is just the survey that we used in partnership with the Indian Health Service. And this is the data that we've been collecting now since, well, gosh, for several weeks now, over 2 months probably now. And we have 36 total Portland ITUs that are reporting this data to us. And so you'll see we have 27 tribal clinics, 6 IHS service units, and 3 urban clinics. And then you'll see right here, we also have just the total number of been tested and the ones who are positive. And then in terms of our data, we verify everything that we do and make sure the numbers are accurate. And we can verify 340 positive cases. We also do collect data on individuals who've been tested outside of the ITU system. So those are included in our numbers. And then we also keep track of what is going on with the status of PPE and test kits. We have heard, and this data doesn't capture it, but there are some tribes who are not reporting to us, we know don't have any test kits at all. So it's not necessarily reflective of what's actually happening, but it's, you know, provides a pretty good picture of what we're seeing. James, if you could go on to the next slide. And then this is what I was trying to share earlier, which again, to me is very concerning, with seeing the numbers go up so drastically. And then next slide, James, please. And then this is what I reported in terms of additional individuals that we've lost. And then we can go on to the next slide, James. And yeah, this is just a summary of how to report the information and what's being requested in terms of reporting. So just thought it was important to obviously to share this information and for you to see the increases in cases that you know, is occurring across our area and across Indian country. And so I really, again, wanted to just see if there's any way that we can provide additional support to you with contact tracing, and do you have what you need? I guess I just wanted to ask those questions to see if there's how we can provide further support. We do have, we should be having the CDC Foundation has offered us 9 to 10 individuals who are going to come on board as board employees at no expense to us, 5 of which will be contact tracers, and we'll have also a grant writer and some other positions that we asked be funded at the request of the tribes on our last call. So we had several tribes on our weekly call last week, and they made requests for very specific positions. So we are going to be able to have those positions funded at the board. But in the meantime, we do have several staff trained in contact tracing. So really just wanted to know how we can support you further. Is there any training? I mean, anything that you need, we really want to provide support, try to keep those numbers down.
Hey, Laura.
Yes, Henry.
This is Henry. Hey, last week we were at the mini health board with the 8 tribes up in our corner, and they were talking about some vaccine thing that they were going to do with the University of Washington. Is that still coming, or they said they're working with you folks on that?
Yeah, you were not working on that. They were contacting, I think, a few tribes directly, was my understanding. Yeah, we're not working with any university right now on any vaccine trial projects.
Well, I think there's some confusion on it because our doctors understood that they were working with the Portland Health Board on this vaccine pilot project or some vaccine that they were going to begin here this month.
Yeah, no, they basically, what they asked us to try to coordinate an effort in that way. And we thought it was best if tribes worked directly with them. And so we connected several tribes to them, but we're not actively involved.
Okay.
We basically made the connection. They asked for connections and we reached out to some tribes, and some responded. I'm happy to provide more information next week on that too.
Have you guys heard anything on vaccines coming, or what are you guys hearing?
There's some right now. Obviously, I think one is going through a 3rd trial, but we don't think or anticipate anything to be happening anytime soon in terms of vaccines.
Okay.
Hi, someone just was asking a question.
Yeah, this is Sharon Gowdy from Yakima and also on the ATNI board. I have 2 questions. Number one, what about the individuals that are being tested at the drive-in sites that are being held by the National Guard, et cetera, in different locations in the vicinity, but they're not necessarily tied to IHS? How, are tribal members being tracked through those testing systems? And secondly, are there any GSA or governmental sites to purchase PPE supplies so that each entity isn't doing all of their own and oftentimes at commercial rates? So is there any access to purchasing, PPE through a federal site?
Those are, well, first question, let me answer your first question. The first one, in terms of any of the testing done by the National Guard, it really is up to that individual to report back to the ITU clinic. So if there's any way to encourage your tribal members to make sure to let your tribal clinic or IHS clinic know that they were tested, so that data will get back to our numbers. We are keeping track of tests outside of the ITU system. However, the individual has to make sure to report that information back to their IHS or tribal clinic for it to make it into the data. In terms of any GSA government sites, I am not aware of any at this time in terms of sort of mass purchasing. I will, I do want to share, we have a new consultant who's now working with us, and she's new, and she's been on board for gosh, maybe just over a week now. But I have asked and tasked her to help tribes with finding resources for PPE, so that could lead potentially to her identifying a source for sort of GSA purchasing, but I will share her information with you. She's getting settled right now. And I know, Leonard, it's something I know you brought up to me in terms of the smaller, tribes like yours that don't have clinics, that may not have a resource. I wanted to have a person at the board who could help tribes with identifying various resources for PPE. And there may be an opportunity through this for tribes to purchase, PPE together possibly. So we do now have someone at the board who's going to try to stay more on top of the PPE supplies. I mean, we have been doing it from our survey, but we want to be more proactive to make sure you're getting what you need. Does that help answer your question? There's nothing that I know of now, but I do have a contact now at the board who can assist with that.
Right, because firstly, the National Guard question, I know of people who have been tested by those sites. They're not asked if they're, a tribal member or they should report anywhere else. So I don't think that people know that, as they have been tested. We have had several sites open for that. And number two, I think it makes great sense to do bulk purchasing or mass purchasing, particularly when most tribes have federal pass-through funds like 638s and self-governance, et cetera, that would qualify us for governmental pricing. So, instead of each of us purchasing or trying to find things commercially, that would be a great assistance.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll loop back with you. As I said, she's getting kind of settled right now, and I'll make sure to share her information with Terry as she's sort of getting grounded and sort of getting up to speed. She actually was, so she's very knowledgeable because she was, so we took over some of the 638 shares from the IHS area office for the environmental health program, and she actually worked for that program. So she's super knowledgeable already, and obviously probably knows many of you already. Holly is her name. Sorry, I can't remember her last name right now. She just started, so I apologize for that. But I'll share more information in terms of her contact information.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a question in the chat box, Laura, from David Whitener. His question is, do we have a total number of tests done so far? He's interested in percentage of infection and the percentage in rise in infections.
Sure. So yeah, the slide set that I just showed does have the total number of tests that have been done, at least in our area. And actually the IHS website has the tests that have been done nationally. So for our area, we've had a total of 5,170 tests done. And then we've been able to confirm that 340 of those tests have been positive. Yeah, and here's the slide.
This is Leonard here. As far as tests, I know some tribes are testing all their employees, and a lot of those, some of those would probably be non-members or non-natives. And then like you'd said earlier, we either use our nurses in our human services department to do our testing, and it varies. It's mostly tribal members now. We're only testing symptomatic, but some tribes have gone in and done mass testing, and the jury's out on what's most effective. But I'm just wondering, I'm assuming you are asking them when they submit that data, or they submit that data, that it's just the natives that we're dealing with here.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Any other questions for Laura? Okay.
Thank you again for being here for us.
You're welcome. Please let us know if there's anything more we can do.
Thank you. Okay, Elena is on with us, Elena and Shana. If you could give us a real quick census update on the tribal completion rates. Elena? Elena, do you have a, let me see if I can. Get her
Can't
off.
hear you, Elena.
Shayna, can you comment?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure what happened with Elena. Yeah, so basically the response rates, are encompassing the reservation areas, travel areas for most of the ATNI, if not all of the ATNI tribes. So as you can see, Washington, doing really well. Port Gamble is sitting at 75.2. That's really amazing. Really, our goal is to get 100%. Of course, this covers just the tribal. This covers folks within the boundaries of the reservation. So it doesn't include off-reservation folks. So keep encouraging all of your off-reservation members to participate. So I cover Oregon and Idaho. And for Oregon, we have the top tribe is Kusla or Umpqua, and then Coquel. I saw Chairman Mead on, so good morning. So you all are doing really well, and keep pushing folks to participate. Idaho is doing really well. Kootenai Tribe of Idaho is almost at 70%, which is great. They're really focused on, not having census takers come in. And so that's been their goal. And I know that's a lot of tribes' goals. So just take a look at your response rates if you ever get a moment. And that's really a lot of the updates that I think that we were going to talk about. Just try to keep it brief. From what I understand, we'll be able to come back every week and provide updates. Is that true, Terry?
Yes.
Okay. So if there's any questions, I think, right now we're just continuing to push and encourage folks to complete their census, while we're kind of sitting at home still, so.
I have a question on the statistics. Are there not 27 tribes in Washington? So are there 3 that don't report or haven't reported?
I don't know. Jessica, are you on? I think I saw maybe she was on. Jessica, can you respond to that? If she can hear.
I'll respond.
Oh.
Samish is one of the tribes.
Thanks.
Samish is one of the tribes that's not on your list. The reason why it's not on your list is that we don't have folks living on our trust land or reservation. So our folks are scattered out through the population of Washington State and beyond. We are actively asking them, citizens, to fill out their census though. So it's going to be really difficult to get solid data from that. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Taylor with Cowlitz too, and yeah, we have just a small reservation, and there's no residents, no tribal members living on the reservation at the moment.
Yeah, it's Leonard here in Port Madison. BIA stole most of our land, and we're still trying to get it all back. So we're outnumbered about 8 or 9 to 1 here in Port Madison. So we have to depend on I won't use the word non-Indians. I was going to use the Indian word, but I won't do that today. We all have one. Sorry. But we actually have to depend on them for our score. But I think we've been doing better, but Elena's been working with us to kind of come up with some incentives that other tribes have done. So we're going to copy some of you guys that have been doing incentives.
Well, this is Bill. We'll move Taylor onto the reservation, and we'll score 100%.
You can only count him once, Bill.
I guess, and that brings up a question, is how you compare the percentage rate to the size of the reservation. Maybe 37 is a good number considering population on the reservation.
I think that's a question we have is, how do we know if our people have registered? Because that's one of the things that we don't know. I mean, I know there's I just know we probably can't find out if I've registered or not. Maybe if I give you my address, you could, but I'm just wondering the technical side of that, how we track who do we need to go after.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of folks, a lot of tribes are wanting to know kind of what the response rate is. It's not, just for tribal folks. We can't get that data until afterwards. But right now, I think some tribes are doing really well at tracking their citizens by having them turn in their confirmation forms after they've turned it in, or excuse me. That's kind of the only way you can do it, is really just I think keeping track of it. But right now we don't have access, or we can't get tribes that sort of like response rate on who's currently responding, aside from what we have right now. And it's really based on our geography programs. If you participated in our Luca program, or if your geography team has, that's really how kind of what determines these response rates. And so, it's not perfect, but it's pretty accurate. So it really helps guide leaders and, gives a good idea of how many people are responding on the reservation or within the boundaries.
I think I'm unmuted now. This is Elena. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Morning.
Oh, yay. Good morning. Sorry about that. Thank you, James. One thing to add to what Shana has said, and to the question of how do we know what that percentage means for the tribal lands. It's based off of our master list and how many homes we have that are supposed to be on those census tracts. And so that percentage is based on how many residences are in that area and have responded. It's not any of the data per se, it's just that house is checked off our list now. So starting August 11th is when the enumerator is going to go out and start knocking on the other doors. And the way that I lined up the data for that slide is I put the tribes that are going to need the most help right now to ensure that those enumerators aren't out there for very long. We really need to boost their numbers. And as Leonard said, that does mean outreach to non-tribal citizens that live within the reservation boundaries too.
Okay, thank you, Elena and Shana. Does anybody have any further questions?
Terry, I just wanted to add that just an FYI, since I'm kind of covering congressional, the House Democrats introduced a bill last Wednesday. It's called the Fair and Accurate Census. There's no bill number, but essentially, you know how we've requested to push the deadline a few months to extend it. So just FYI, heads up on that.
Okay, thanks.
Terry, I got one question.
Okay.
When are we going to start hiring these enumerators? We heard that they were supposed to start last month, or is there when these people come on the ground?
Sure. It depends on each area census office. So in Washington, there are 5 offices, and all of them are starting to pull what we call the certification. So that's people that have done their fingerprints, answered all the follow-up questions, and I believe training's supposed to start next week or the week after, and then it'll go up until the operation starts, because some people have applied, but what's going on in the states and with the health and everything else, some people are declining the work now. So we are still accepting applications, and the way that we're sure to hire tribal members is based on language. We can't hire based on race, but if tribal members will list their language, no matter their proficiency, then the area census offices will pull zip codes for tribal lands and look for language. They just have to be available at least 20 hours a week for that work.
Oh, good. Okay. So it's not too late to apply then. That's great.
Yeah, it's all online. It's pretty fast. The one weird thing is that the ACOs call from random phone numbers. So some people are like, oh, heck, that's a bill collector, and I answer that. And here it's the census trying to offer them a job. Yeah. So we're asking people, please answer any weird phone calls in the next couple of weeks, because that's how they offer the jobs, is by phone calls primarily.
Okay, thank you.
I have kind of a personal question. My wife signed up to be and took the interview and was told she was going to start, and then the COVID came. What should I tell her to do next? Just wait?
Yeah, she should still be on the list. She'll get a call from the field manager. She can definitely call that ACO and check on her status and say, I'm still available, what's going on? And they should be able to tell her then too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Census. Thank you, Shana. Thank you, Elena. Very quickly, I apologize, but we have to modify the agenda here for very quickly. Kevin Alice is with us, and Kevin's only got a couple more minutes to be with us. Kevin?
Hey, how are you? Hi, everybody. Yeah, I have to jump on an FCC call at 1 o'clock. I'm sorry. So, Terry, do you want me to talk about the VOCA grant program or other stuff? I understand you talked to Virginia yesterday.
Yeah, we can do that, whatever's.
Yeah, so real quick on that, NCAI entered in a cooperative agreement with DOJ, OVC last August, early September to help them get out some of the VOCA fund money that they couldn't, $14 million. They also entered into an agreement with the Denali Commission to work with the tribes in Alaska. So we're only working with the tribes in the lower 48, and Alaska is taken care of by the Denali Commission. We partnered with a couple organizations to develop this program, and it rolled out Monday. The first, it'll last for a period of 3 years. We're gonna get the $14 million out the door in 3 years. The maximum grant amount that we can give is $350K per tribe. The first group that'll be targeted, and this is mandatory by DOJ and OVC, is to work with the tribes that have not received funding in recent times under this program. So there's 205 tribes. They should have received a notification yesterday that they are eligible for this first round of funding. The tribes will have until, I believe it, let me just check that date. It's June 26th, just to express interest. Yep, they just have to send a communication in response to the notification saying they're interested. And then by mid-August, they'll have to submit an application. There's going to be some level of technical assistance that's provided along the way. We really advocated strongly with OVC at the time that we were deciding whether or not to help them out in this effort. And then after, we did cross that bridge to say, hey, look, with a lot of these tribes that have not received funding, they need some assistance. They need some assistance in making sure that they put together the application correctly and know, what to do with it. And we need that assistance. So that's going to happen. So if you're one of those 205 tribes, you've received that notification, respond to it by June 26th and to get in the queue, and you'll get a notification on what's next that needs to be submitted prior to mid-August. Now, once we get through this, the second phase, we open up to everybody. So roughly in about a little over a year from now, we'll be gearing up to get the rest of the money out to all tribes, whether your tribes have received funding in the past, whether they're even receiving funding in the current monies that are available directly from DOJ. So that's really quickly, that's where we are. Virginia Davis is taking the lead on that. She's the contact person. If you have any questions, reach out to Virginia Davis, vdavis@ncai.org. She'll respond to you and get back to you with any questions or comments. Moving quickly, I know you're going to be talking about the CARES Act, and Brian talked about some FAQs. NCAI sent 2 letters to Treasury over the course of the last 10 days. One is, with respect to the 40% that hasn't gone out yet. Brian's right. They extended the funding period or the enrollment period, or whatever you want to call it, to midnight this past Friday. So it's now officially closed. The 40%, as you know, in conversations and communications, is going to be some kind of formula that's going to include tribal employment numbers and expenditure numbers. We sent a letter, clarifying and explaining what, they kind of bifurcated the two, right? Government employees and tribal enterprise employees. We stressed upon Treasury, they need to be careful on that because our tribal businesses are so closely connected with our tribal governments, and our tribal governments, fund essential government services from these tribal enterprises. So, if there's, I don't know why they did that, what the purposes of that, but kind of, trying to fill that gap where there's clearly not a full understanding of how the businesses and tribal governments interact to make sure that we don't get burned or hurt in that regard. We also then, that raises the issue with the Alaska Native corporations. If they're going to weigh these employees differently, whether they're governmental or tribal enterprise employees, how in the heck are they going to determine what's eligible for the ANCs? Because they look like our business development corporations, which are maybe be given different consideration, and that's really not fair. Makes no sense, and again is a further argument on why ANC should never have been considered in this calculus in the first place. On my business development corporation and my tribe, Potawatomi Business Development Corporation, we modeled it after the ANC model, which many organizations, tribal business development corporations did. So they need to know that, they need to know the relationship. We also spoke very firmly about confidentiality. Who is going to get this information? Why would they get it? All that kind of stuff. We need express assurances from Treasury that they're going to keep a close hold on this. We already have lack of confidence here because they got leaked out in the past. We want to make sure that future FOIA requests don't cause this information to be dispersed. We don't know why it needs to be shared across different government agencies to really keep it close hold and to get them to note that. The second letter we sent was on the use of funds. NCAI held a town hall recently with tribal leaders on how they're using that money. That was in response to many questions I was getting about how tribes can use it. In the FAQs, they talk about different ways that tribal members can get funds from this and what, kind of fuzzy kind of direction on what tribes can do to get funds to individual tribal members. But there's this issue about economic stimulus, helping tribal members by directly sending them checks. We're very concerned about that. We can't give legal advice, but as an organization, we're really worried about what would happen on the back end because of this, lack of clarity on what tribes can do with respect to dispersing these funds to tribal members. We're very sensitive to this, and although we can't take a legal position on it, advise tribes to work with their lawyers and their accountants and make sure whatever it is, however they disperse those funds, that they can be tied to this pandemic. Okay, you can't just send out it. One thing's for sure, this is not a settlement check. Okay, that the tribes are getting, that they can just divvy it up equally amongst all the tribal members. It has to be tied to the pandemic. So work with your professionals on how you'll be able to justify that on the back end. That's all. That's the best I can say on that, and stress upon it too, because there's nothing in the language of this bill that would, as far as I read it, and see, that allows tribes just to give money with no accountability for it. If you have tribal members that are suffering from the pandemic in certain economic ways, seems to us, seems to lawyers, that you can design some kind of program that addresses that is an unbudgeted, necessary expenditure as a result of COVID-19. All really important points that I'm sure your professionals will advise you on. But we did send that letter to Treasury to clear up this issue. Can you send checks to tribal members, or can you not? Okay, make it clear. Now, some people have said, why do you want to do that? Well, we shouldn't trust anything these folks are doing. okay? And if we need to know exactly what they're thinking. They're beating all around the bush on this kind of stuff, but not hitting it on point. We need for our tribal leaders and our tribes to be clear on what the eligible uses are and what they're not, because we're hearing a lot of questions. Well, we don't know if we can spend the money, so we're going to do this. Well, whatever this is needs to be eligible and comply, because the clawbacks and the IRS implications and tax implications, all the mess on the end, if it's not, you know, distributed to for an eligible cause, could be very problematic, you know, individually for the tribes and also with future funding on other situations. So we're just trying to get clarity on that and know exactly where the guardrails are. They need to tell us that. They've been very restrictive in their language. And if they mean to be restrictive and don't want us to do certain things, we need to know exactly what those are. So I'll leave it at that. But any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer it. And I know you've got, you know, other folks today talking about this.
I have a question. I have a question. With the second letter you sent about individual payments, which can be defined as per each per capita payment, and we all have tribal members who are looking to their tribal leadership of how they're going to spend these relief funds, and they see on social media that some tribes have given distribution, you know, to their members, and so they're saying, well, why can't we do that? Because these other tribes have given out individual checks to their distributed. And I guess if it's, and I'm not guessing, I know it has to be pandemic relief, you know, relief and unbudgeted, et cetera. But then are you telling us that it's problematic in those tribes that have done theirs? There's a very likelihood that they're going to have to repay that if they can't document individually that each person needed one?
So I'm not a fortune teller on that, but if it can't be articulated, my sense is, and you've got legal counsel coming right on after me, if you can't clearly articulate that it was pandemic related and what for, okay, there might be a problem on the back end, okay? It's just, generally sending money out to folks is a problem. And you're experiencing what other tribal leaders are. I was on a call with the Intertribal Council of Nevada last week. There are 4 tribal leaders being subject to a recall because they're not just sending checks. And they want, you know, they're asking us to send them a letter saying that, you know, because they did not want to send out checks willy-nilly, you know, just to their tribal members, because they knew it wasn't right. And some of the information that's kind of floating out there hasn't been totally accurate. The real first big story that I heard and I spoke with was the Pyramid Lake Paiute. And I had a great conversation with all the tribal council on a Friday evening to find out what they were really doing. And it turns out that the reporting was wrong, that they weren't just sending out $2,000 checks to tribal members. It was subject to a program that was put together that tribal members had to certify the use of the money, what it was for, why they needed it, and they could tie every dot every I and cross every T with respect to it being in response to this pandemic. That's you know, I can't. At the end of the day, I think we all are going to have to spend this money in a way that we just have to expect that when the IG investigates this and people are coming and they send the dogs after us, that we can check all the boxes and say, yeah, you know, this was for rent because somebody, you know, lost their job. This was for, you know, something that they no longer could take care of because of some situation that resulted from this pandemic that otherwise wouldn't have occurred.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and I think it's a good transition over to our next speaker there, Terry.
Thank you, Kevin.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin, before Kevin goes, just one quick one, Leonard. I apologize. I agree with what you're saying. I think that makes complete sense. And I think everybody has to kind of couch it with the fact that I think that I've told them that the government is hiding the ball on us right now. Leonard, you probably understand what that means better than most of us, but we're trying to crack that nut and understand what they're after. But There is, I think, a logic that you can put into under the GWE, General Welfare Exclusion Act, where you can allocate funds based on a general need, which, for instance, if there's a general need for masks or a general need for your additional grocery costs, because everybody's paying more for groceries now and probably having them delivered, and you're eating out, but having that delivered. And so there's general costs, I think, to think about. And yeah, it's one of the tribes I saw was distributing checks for $250. Okay, that's maybe a response to that pressure that Sharon's talking about, but and it's not going to be a huge amount. It's going to be it's just going to be a small amount of money. I think that's going to take this to be, maybe a partial solution anyway. All right, thank you.
All right, Terry, let's go ahead and transition.
Okay, you know what? It's a good transition into our speaker from Nicole Elliott from Holland and Knight, but we had a couple of other updates, and that was with Chairwoman Brenda Mead. Brenda was going to briefly talk about the reopening of the Mill Casino, and I don't think Ray Peters is on, but he was going to speak to Little Creek opening up. But Brenda, are you there?
Hi, Terry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, good morning. Daisla. I think your time is running low today, so I won't take very much time. I just, you asked for an update on the Mill Casino, and the Coco tribe did look at a reopening plan. Just to take you back, we declared an emergency on March 18th and closed the Mill Casino. It ended up being closed for 2 months. But during that time, a reopening plan was put together by our SEDCO team, our Economic Development Corporation, and safety play plan is the protocols that guided that decision for the council to open. We were the first to reopen our casino in Oregon and had no intentions of being the first one, but we were ready. And where we are in Coos County, our county also was approved for opening in that same day. So it was a lot of conversations between our local governments, our county and state, as well as just looking at NIGC's guidelines, CHC guidelines, and really looking at whether we were ready, and we felt we were. We're still under a soft opening, phase 1 opening, and it's been, I guess it's been a couple of weeks now, a little over a couple of weeks, and we have made some adjustments, but for the most part, it seems to be working, and it seems that our guests are good with the fact that we will hand them a mask if they don't have one, and we encourage them to wear it, but we are not enforcing it. But our employees, we are asking our employees to wear their masks, and so far, so good. Practicing social distancing and making sure that we have spacing in place, and that we did have our restaurants pretty much closed other than takeout, but they've actually opened up another area of the casino and are making it to where we have seating now, so it is opening up a little more for our restaurants. But we go by a safety play plan, which is the protocols for the entire property and protocols for every department, and training for our employees. So we still are not open 24 hours. We still close down at night and do a deep cleaning of the facility, and just taking care of things here. We have no increases in Coos County for our numbers. We have never had a case in our hospitals. So we've been blessed. And for that reason, I think we pay attention to our hospital capacity. We pay attention to our capacity for testing and for contact tracing abilities. We've been doing some training with IHS actually, and looking at our plan for isolation and quarantine if there is an issue. and just keeping in contact with our community partners and seeing how folks are feeling too. Was there anything specific that you had questions about?
Any questions for Brenda? Okay, thank you, Chairman Mead. We appreciate you being with us and giving us an update on your reopening.
Thank you.
And then next we have Nicole Elliott. Nicole's with Holland and Knight, and she will be speaking to allowable expenditures with regards to the CARES Act. Nicole?
Hi, everyone. Just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Nicole Elliott, and I work in Washington, D.C. So good morning to all of you. It's late afternoon here. And I work with the Native American Law Group in Holland and Knight. My opinion is also, I think, here today somewhat a little bit different from what I've been hearing, in that part of my background is that I also worked for the Treasury Department and the IRS as an executive, and have worked on hundreds of FAQ guidance projects for them, and have worked with Dan Kowalski, who I know has been very active in this space. But one of our large practice areas right now is helping several tribes figure out what is an eligible expense for under the CARES Act and what is not. I would say, just as a background, as was said earlier, all of this could change. The HEROES Act that was introduced by the House Democrats does change, and thankfully loosens the restrictions on what tribes and what states and locals can use this money for. So it is an ever kind of moving needle in terms of that, and as was mentioned, the updated Treasury FAQs. I would say, you know, as we look as lawyers, as one of the professionals involved, we do look to the two main documents that Treasury produced on what it thinks is an eligible expenditure and what is not. I will say that, you know, those in my mind do not, I know they do not have the force of law. And part of our jobs is reading through the lines and figuring out what the statute says in addition. I feel sort of strongly that, you know, Treasury is not going to provide all the answers here for us. And I think there is some danger in asking them to do so. How they have rolled out this fund for tribes, I think, has been somewhat of a disappointment. The reason that the second submission was delayed was because so many tribes were having huge issues getting through to the system. And as we saw with the second submission, it was based on employment data and then expenditures. And the way that even that guidance was written clearly showed that Treasury, who is working on this, doesn't understand Indian country very well. So we are, and I kind of think of the eligible expenditures kind of as a red light, a yellow, and a green light, in terms of some are very safe and some are very obvious, and some are definitely not okay under the statutory language or otherwise. And then there's a big gray area, and I think it also, what I'm seeing is that tribes have different risks for tolerance. You know, that is just an individual kind of decision. But, you know, I would stress to, you know, push the envelope where we can. Yes, there is an inspector general at the end of this who is responsible for finding and potentially auditing everyone, state and locals included, who got these funds. My instinct and my experience tells me that they will be very focused on the kind of the very big and obvious things. Did the recipient double dip into this and another fund and use the same expenditure? Were they keeping decent records? And I think that's where the Inspector General will be focused. We are hopeful that they will not be in there to second guess decisions of tribal leadership on what is necessary and what is a necessary expense. And I will say, before I answer any questions, and I know we're short of time, you know, the other thing that I stress, in addition to figuring out, you know, is this a definitely an eligible expenditure? Is this definitely not an eligible expenditure? Is also focusing on your process, your procedure, your documentation, and your prioritization. So that's what we have been helping tribes do a lot. What is, You know, when someone wants to get some of this fund in enterprise, what is the proper format? How should they be submitting this? What should be going back? And I think, as was stressed earlier, one of this I think will be important, and you know, that's where your kind of professionals come in. So when we're, for example, part of the process is if there's a question about whether an expense is eligible, working with your attorney to make sure that back and forth, for example, is attorney-client privilege, so that when the Inspector General comes along, should there be a question about whether this is eligible, you know, they don't get the memo or the back and forth emails. We're not sure, we don't know if this is an eligible expenditure. So in addition to just the legal about eligible expenditure, which I understand people are rightfully focused on, just thinking even broader picture, I think is really important to set yourself up for success. And then the other thing I would say is, kind of a broader theme is that it is true that the December 30th, 2020 deadline is one of the 3 requirements that's causing tribes a lot of issues. And one of the things that we have been working with tribes is to creatively think around that December 30th. And all we know from Treasury is that it says expended, for example. So query whether, rather than just buy portables that really are not very useful to the tribe in the long term, whether there's an option, for example, to use the money and put it in escrow and figure out how to use those dollars a little better. But that December is a real pressure point, and we've been very focused on that and thinking about creative ways. On the other issue that was raised, whether there can be direct payments to tribal members, I think Chairman Allen made a comment that that is also where I fall if done correctly and documented correctly. And again, I worry about, you know, asking Treasury for guidance. As we saw, there are already tribes doing this. So what would happen, for example, if Treasury came out with some terrible guidance that said, no, I get the need for certainty, but I also think, you know, we've been given a statute. The tribes have sovereignty and should be thinking about what is necessary in their judgment. And I would just caution a little bit about reading too much into these real Treasury FAQs and seeking further guidance.
Well, thank you, Nicole. This is Bill Isle with Cowlitz, and I think you're hitting the high points there. That's really important. I think that we understand that there is a lot of gray area in this, and I agree. It's all that gray area has been there since 2014 with the GWE. Have you worked with GWE much at all, or is that, because that can be a component of this whole discussion, I believe, and should be, because tribes are giving money to their members for their general benefit under that act, and that excludes it from taxation.
Yes.
And so the other thing, though, is the a per capita for economic stimulus, like the federal government did, would have to be done under an income guideline. And we don't, as tribes, we don't have access to their income records. Clearly, that's not going to be an option for us. So we have to stay away from, I think, from the economic stimulus thing, unless it's documented with a unemployment record or something like that. So maybe we could throw in an extra economic stimulus payment if we're paying rental assistance for somebody that's employed. So that would be a method maybe to look at. But I'm maybe hoping I can have some staff reach out to you, Helen and Knight, probably first.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't know if Chairman Allen has anything else to add, because that is an issue. The TTAC, which is the Treasury Tribal Group, and Chairman Allen is heavily involved, have been just discussing this. How do you design a program that hits general welfare and can be used in COVID so that it's tax-free to your members? Exactly, and I absolutely think it can be done.
Well, we are doing it, I'll
Good.
tell you. Yeah.
Well, the only thing that I would add to Nicole's summary, which I think she summarized it well, the TTAC subcommittee on GWE has been bringing this topic up ever since the Paiute tribe raised that issue. Kevin did a good job of summarizing the way they allocated it. It was not exactly how it appeared to people. But the main issue is what Nicole was saying, is that we just have to document it. When we're sending payments out, whether they're equal or any other variation of payments to our citizens. We just need to document it, why it's relevant to the COVID-19 impact. And then the GWE safe harbor codes that all of us or most of us have it needs to be reconciled with it. And many of us are inserting new additional criteria in the codes that are relevant to disaster or emergency relief. So that you're basically dotting I's, crossing T's in terms of the basis for it, and that it's an authorized expenditure to the citizens.
Absolutely.
Well, I have a question. When we have, this is Sharon Gowdy, when we have tribal members that don't all reside on the reservation, you know, in the boundaries of the reservation, and particularly seniors, right at the very beginning, our seniors had a great impact. We talked about the elders and the autoimmune, et cetera, populations. And if a disbursement was made at the very beginning so that elders had some resources to buy cleaning supplies, and at that time we didn't know what PPE was, but it was during this, when it was declared a state of emergency or a pandemic. To me, it seems like even though that was an individual payment per elder, that was eligible because the specific statement on it was this is for purchase of cleaning supplies, and it was very nominal. It was $75 per member. That would qualify without having to have each member sign off on it, because with a population of 11,000 and, you know, a good percentage of members that don't live on the reservation, the attempt was to try to assist all the elders regardless of where they were living, but they were enrolled members. Now, that's the kind of question I'm wondering when I asked earlier of Kevin, well, what about, you know, those folks, I know that it's been a per member distribution for elders, but it's not a per capita per se. It was specifically designated for purchases for this time. So I guess that's kind of, I don't know if you understand my question, but.
Yeah, no, I understand your question. Yeah, I mean, based on the FAQs we have, I don't think it matters whether they are on reservation or off reservation. It was clearly something you did to make sure your most vulnerable population was protected from COVID-19. And assuming the documentation there, I don't feel the need that people would have to, under this guidance or otherwise, you know, administratively feasible, I think is the language that the Treasury FAQ is, to get some sort of certification from everyone or something. I don't think that's what Treasury anticipates or contemplates. And so I think that would be an eligible expenditure under law and under guidance.
Right, because our GWE applies to our elders. So that, again, probably is already covered in that discussion. So, okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just, again, I wanted to, this is Bill with Cowlitz again. I've been speaking with Daniel Kowalski now for several weeks, but it's once a week. And I do think he's, as I mentioned to Ron earlier, I think he's coming around and understanding a little bit. He might be about 4 or 5% there by now. So we got a long ways to go.
Yeah, he is about 4 or 5% on tribal. He has, I think, attended some of the TTAC meetings, but he does not have a real strong background here in Indian country. And the other problem is, right, he's pulled in a million different directions.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Nicole. He's experiencing a crash course, Bill, and people like you and myself and others who are engaging him are trying to help him understand the complexity of Indian country. So,
absolutely, yep.
There's more to come if that second wave of Stimulus 4 comes. It'll come through Treasury again. So we need to keep the pressure on him to understand tribes versus the earlier conversation that Brian brought up about the ANCs.
Leonard here. I think our best solution is through Congress. You know, this guy didn't want this job. It's forced upon him. And so, you know, good luck with your conversations, but I'm not, you know, I just feel like ultimately it's Congress is going to have to fix this thing, because this came out of the House Democrats, And we did get some help from from Tom Cole. We can't forget that too, because he was able to keep this going, but it's really coming out of the House. They didn't want this. Mark Meadows tried to shout it down. He tried to put it to 100 million. So I just want us to remember where our friends are. Thanks.
No, I agree, Leonard. And I don't know if you noticed it, but now that Brian Mercier at the region here, he can't speak for Treasury or the CARES Act whatsoever anymore. They put a mouthpiece on him because I think they just want to have control of that dialogue in DC. Yet we hardly hear anything coming out of DC. But I agree with Nicole. You don't want to ask the question because you might get the wrong answer. And so I think that's kind of the premise I've thought all along with GWE as well. So appreciate the information and the update today.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm free if anyone feels wants to reach out to me, even if just for informal, does this sound like an eligible expenditure? Happy to do that, because we are seeing, of course, lots of different questions from lots of different tribes. And so, it helps, I think, also to, you don't want to base it off of rumor like we saw earlier, but helps to share ideas with tribes about what they're using their money on, what infrastructure, et cetera, how to get around the December deadline. So happy to chat with anyone who's so interested.
Yeah, I had a real quick question. As far as our annual audits, the tribes, tribal governments have their annual audits. I can't remember what they're called, but we're required to do an audit.
Yeah.
Will this money be audited in that particular audit?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. There's
Because I was thinking the IG is going to come around, right? But
yeah, the reason I asked you and Terry to put Nicole on is she and her firm are one of the firms tracking closely what's allowable. But I would also point out Moss Adams in our Northwest, that's among the accounting CPA firms that are also tracking it. And I just want to make sure that all of us are being very careful so that it doesn't become a problem for us down the road. We do not want to let $1 go back to the feds. And so we just want to make sure the tribes are on top of it, and particularly our accounting firms, Leonard.
yeah, I was just going to say, Ron, because the thing is the IG's office isn't going to get around to everybody, but we're going to have to go through an annual audit anyway, so that even if the IG doesn't come knocking, you're going to have your auditors following the guidance, right?
Yeah.
Henry, did you have a question?
Well, I just want to remind us, that, what you have heard, we're doing a distribution, but, it was a hard thing to come to, but, we've come to the conclusion, that we have the highest poverty rates around. We have the lack of housing, the food program was under a lot of stress. Our fishing community collapsed. So, we're not afraid to kind of go through this with Treasury, but I think one of the things we need to remind ourselves is that we're still underfunded, and the United States is still yet to look at the disparity, funding disparities that we've lived under for the last 30, 40 years now. So one of the things we need to remind ourselves is that the United States hasn't lived up to its obligations. And we got to remind ourselves that these things still exist, whether COVID was here or not. We still have high rates of poverty, and we're over. The housing is a big thing right now for us, and we're going to invest a lot of money into housing because this quarantine and these things that are happening, we don't have enough houses, and it's a problem. We got a lot of homeless people on the reservation that are living in trailers and really doing the best they can, but our land is so tied up with the Bureau. The realty office is underfunded, so it leaves a lot of our people with no land. They have land, but they can't use it. And it's causing a lot of problems within the tribe and a lot of stress. So there is a lot of things, Nicole, that we got to remind ourselves that this funding, we see it differently sometimes. It's not just COVID funding, but it's federal funding.
Yes, and I would say, that is why Thinking about how this money can be used and benefit the tribe in the long term and not only the short term. And what are the things, is it a housing for elderly that can be converted sometime after when it's no longer needed? And how do we use this not only to solve short term, but also think about longer term economics? Absolutely agree with everything you said.
And when someone earlier, this is Sharon Gowdy, when you talked about double dipping, so then the tribes, I'm just making a comment, probably really need to review the money that comes from HUD and all the other resources to make sure that the tribe itself, is coordinating some of the resources that are being applied to the reservation in totality. So to make sure we're not using it for the same thing.
Yeah, and that was just a comment about if I'm the IG and I've got all these things that I've got to look at, it's not going to be second guessing, whether tribal council really thought it was necessary. It's going to be things that I can see from the audits, things that are, just are smack in the face of, we didn't keep any documents. It all went to compensation to one person. Really kind of low hanging fruit, and I agree with that.
Well, don't confuse double dipping with complementary use. So you may get COVID monies from different sources, but they're both being used to contribute to a particular objective.
Project. Yeah.
And they can be used to complement. They just you can't use them for the same purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Nicole's contact information in the chat box, and please see the one that is from me. That's the correct one. But does anybody have any other questions for Nicole? Nicole, we really appreciate your time today, and thank you for hanging in there with us.
No worries. Thank you
So
for
I have a
having
question
me.
for Nicole. So earlier, Nicole, we talked about FEMA and the match.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything along those lines?
As you were saying that, I am 80% sure that is allowable, and that there was something from some government agency that said that. I can follow up and find that for you if you like.
There's been no confirmation of the money being used for the 25% match.
Let me go look at that for you, because I thought there had been. And I will reach out to Terry, who can connect us.
I think the new FAQs kind of allude to it, and so maybe that's just an interpretation that they're sharing.
Nicole, we do have one more issue if you want to try and find that while we're talking about this other issue.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Chairwoman Brenda Mead has another issue that she'd like to discuss with the tribal leaders. So Brenda, go ahead.
Again, Daisa, and thank you for your time. I won't take up too much time, but I thought that it was important to update you on something that has come up for the Kokol tribe. We recently received notice from the Department of Interior that I wanted to share with you, but I wanted to take you back just a little bit. It's been about 8 years since the Kokol tribe put in a FEDA trust application for 2.42 acres of land in our service area. It is for gaming, and we have went through the NEPA process for that last 8 years. But for you all, I wanted to bring this forward because we've recently received a arbitrary decision by the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, John Tasuda, that they are declining our application. Not my outrage about the declining or the no answer, but the actual fact that we are in the middle of a NEPA process right now. We have not completed that process. We have not had our public hearing. We have not had the process that we have been promised by Congress to have. And the reason that I'm bringing this forward is because I know that NCAI and ATI tribes all consulted with the Department of Interior at the very beginning of this administration, this Trump administration. And were very loud and clear that we did not want them to have the authority to make pre-decisions for tribes with their fee to trust application processes utilizing the 151 regs. And they are doing it now. This is the first time they've done it. They've chose a small tribe, but I'm not going to be quiet about it because I believe that this affects all tribes. So again, just a reminder, it was about 2016, 2017 that they did consultation with all the tribes, asking if you would support the Department of Interior, BIA, the ability to say yes or no before the process was given to you, and you all said no, that you wanted the process, you wanted to be able to tell your story and to make sure that they are considering things by law, not by politics. And they've decided to do it anyways. And we have some decisions to make as far as how we'll move forward. But I'm going to continue to share this information with folks. And if you would like more information, I did send our press release out to Terry. Terry, if you could share with folks, that would be great. And if you have any questions, give me a call. I'd love to talk about it in any venue you can give me. I will continue to talk about it because they don't get to take that right from the Coquille tribe or any other tribe. They haven't gotten that permission. This is federal law, and they're not following it. So they're not following their own law. So we have a problem with the Trump administration right now, and it's huge. Indian country. So thank you. I'm only taking up a few minutes. If you have a better time to talk, I would take it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman Mead, and I will share the press release.
So one thing, this is Henry Terry, is that we introduced a bill a while back on restricted fee land. You know, I really think that we should really find ways to understand what that restricted fee was about. You know, really, it is something that we should get back to, and taking control of our own land and putting our own title into it. And you know, just like the Senecas, you know, we've kind of learned this from Rob Porter on what the Senecas are doing, but all their land is controlled by the tribe. It's not controlled by the Bureau. And you know, we really want to get back to, you know, revisiting those principles and taking control of our own land. And somehow over the time, we've allowed the United States to take control of our land and decide, you know, what we can and can't have. And I don't think it's time that we begin to kind of get our minds around realty and our land and what really what that means to us. Because we're losing every day, it sounds like now.
Well, this is Ron. I certainly share the concerns about the land in the trust period, much less the land in the trust for purposes of gaming that Brenda's referencing. I think many of us should be very concerned about the basis for the denial and the basis for the denial in this timing of the process, which is very odd in coming from the Secretary's office. So to Shuda, you would expect to be a friend, but he hasn't been as good a friend as we would like in this administration. So Terry, sharing that with all of us, I think is to be important. And Leonard, this might be an issue where we want to clarify our Northwest position on this topic. This specifically is relative to gaming and the legitimacy and the right of tribe to acquire land in the trust for the purposes of gaming. There's the part two, it's a very high bar to get over in the first place. It's something we want to protect tribes' rights on that matter. So I know Spokane, who I don't think they're on the line here, but they certainly know. They went through a very tough process to get their land over there in Airway Heights, get into trust.
And Brenda.
Thank you. I just want to, if it's okay, I want to clarify that we're not going through the two-part determination. Our Restoration Act is very specific where we have rights to put to game. And we actually have an ILD right now on Indian lands determination that says we have the right to game there. The question of the Department of Interior right now is if this land is allowable to be put in trust. That's the only thing we're going through for this NEPA. And they are denying us that, even though our Restoration Act specifically says we can put, if us poor Indians can buy land and own it outright, that we can put land into trust if we ask them, and they'll give us a process. And they have failed us. And you know, every tribe is different. I just want to make sure this is not off-reservation gaming. This is not two-part determination. We are not, the question of gaming is gone. This is fee to trust, and they've decided because of political push and some strong opposition that they just want us to go away. And they're using that 151 regulation and bypassing the NEPA process, which is crazy bizarre to me. So yeah, it's a whole bunch of things. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure that information.
This is Taylor. I'm on the ATNI executive board. I'm just curious. I don't know if there's a resolution or a letter that maybe that could be developed through ATNI on this matter that the ATNI can promote. I don't know if what committee that would be part of, probably.
Well, right to Ron. I mean, I agree with you, Taylor. But because the circumstances are unique, the way Brenda is describing them, there's not a two-part process. Then we need to be clear about what they said in their denial, what's the basis of their denial, and then what the tribe's counter argument is why it's legitimate. It's legally, they have the legal authority to convert it over into gaming. So your letter needs to be very specific about why we're defending that right.
Yeah, that's been the problem, of course, without. Go ahead.
I can get you a one-pager of just some information.
This is Sharon, and my suggestion is we do have the Trust Reform Committee, and there have been a couple of fee to trust resolutions to my memory, and specifically in the last meeting that we held, there was a fee to trust presentation where Yakima agreed to host here a fuller, forum just on that issue alone. But because of the pandemic, we had to postpone that meeting. But if seeing that the issue is different for Coquille, maybe after we read the letter, we could do a separate resolution supporting, the criteria that's listed in that denial, then also re-represent the past resolutions dealing with fee to trust. Because I think that's an issue that affects us nationwide, not just Northwest. And the more we can do to get behind it and support it, the better.
Yeah, if you get the information.
So Leonard, I got a recommendation. Why don't we invite John DeSouza to be on a call with us next week? Hello? Hello?
Boy, that stopped the argument.
Why don't we just why don't we just invite DeSouza to meet with our ATNI executive committee to kind of get an explanation of what the hell is going on? Because what happens to them affects all of us. So as our president, Mr. President, I'd ask that we set up a call with DeSouza to see what's really happening.
Yeah, I get an opportunity to speak here. I raised my hand. I was just going to say, this is not a surprise to me. If you know how this administration started out, they gave local government officials veto power over our fee to trust process. And we heard that from the beginning. I know Kaysen and DeSouza were in some meetings where they said, well, we'll weigh it and we'll look at it. And there's, if we have enough dialogue, we'll go ahead. We potentially go ahead. So was what they said at the very beginning. Now, I don't know all the details of this particular issue, and I think we need to get that. We need to know the details of which county officials have objected and what kind of weight they have, because if this is just, sometimes they just have to placate their local, excuse my words, rednecks that are anti-tribal, and that we can somehow, if you play it out long enough to where it just turns out just to be unsubstantiated anti-tribal position, sometimes you can get this stuff through. So that's the one thing that we'll need a background on. And I want to make sure we have all that in before we invite anybody in, because they'll just spin their wheels until we can put that kind of pressure on them. But I'm more than willing to have them in as long as we're prepared.
Yeah, I think you're right, Henry. We should be prepared on this, Leonard. And we went through. Kaysen was on ours starting in 2005. Okay, and so and I got to know him personally. I think he even had a house in the gorge. So, you know, he had more in it than what he was saying, but. And he's still there. He proclaims to be our friend, you know, for helping us long ago, but he helped us through 14 years of getting land into trust. And so anyway, it sounds like they're way short on administrative procedures, and there's going to be a lawsuit, I think, going through, but it'll take a long time. I know that. I can guarantee that.
So I think I'd like the first, Brenda, if you would get us that information on the background on this particular feat of trust, and we can get out some of the folks here that have been through it recently, and we can come up with a strategy. I'm not trying to put it off.
Great, I appreciate that. I'll get it to Terry.
And you'll probably need to talk to your people too to see if you want to make sure your people are fine with us taking this on as well, okay? Because we're more willing to back you, but we're going to make sure that you've talked to your people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get you a kind of a briefing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll start our own protest.
Say what?
Yeah. Okay, and with that, Leonard, that should be it.
Oh, that's it. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? I know that. Go ahead,
Leonard. David Burnett here. I know there was some discussion about PPE earlier, and this might be a repeat of information y'all have heard before, but in partnership with the Heritage Distilling Company, the Chehalis tribe is producing sanitizer. We're producing as much as 30,000 gallons a day. We have the ability to meet your need, whatever that need is. I know earlier there was some discussion about trying to get some, bulk type of pricing. We can, provide 750 milliliter bottles. That's typically $15 a bottle. If you do the math, that comes out to about $75 a gallon. But we can also sell you a 5-gallon can of this stuff and that price gets down to about $40 a gallon. Maybe in the casino operations, and depending on how, what kind of quantities you're using, we can sell you a 275-gallon tote, and we can get the price all the way down to $25 a gallon. So we have the ability to produce whatever you need, and with bulk purchasing, we can get that price down pretty low. So if you want any information, you can contact me, or you can just simply go on to the Heritage Distilling website, click on their menu, and find the hand sanitizer. 95% of everything that they produce is produced right here on the Chehalis Reservation.
That's great. We'll get in touch with you, everybody.
Yeah, just don't ask for the Jamestown discount. It'll cost you more. One more thing, Leonard. I just shipped you off an email. And for the Washington State tribes, Leonard and I are trying to find a time to talk to the governor's shop about our state sharing of the $2.9 billion. And so we're just trying to set up a discussion. Just want to make sure the tribes are aware that we're pushing that envelope. We got the 10 million now. You should have your grants for that. But now we want at least 2.5% of that 2.9 billion, which is around 73 or 74 million.
Ron, this is Henry.
I will check that email.
Okay.
Are we trying to do this through AWT, Ron?
Well, I think that if Leonard and I can find a day time with David Postman and David Schumacher and Craig Bill, then we would want to weave in, at a minimum, our work group that we use for the 10 million to begin that discussion, then bring in all the rest of the tribes.
Okay.
We just we basically got to get them to agree that we should have a share of that money.
At a minimum, and we could even talk about our employment. You know, you get back to the employment and all of the other factors that go in, it raises our contribution far above and beyond the per capita contribution.
I agree, Bill.
What have you heard with the money, with the NOAA money, Ron?
Well, that's a separate conversation about the tribes accessing some of that 50 million that they got. As you well know, we're already moving forward on the 5.1 million for the tribes, which is a very onerous process, which is a topic we need to discuss whether or not that it's appropriate or not based on the CARES Act guidance. But the 50 million has the same criteria. That's a separate conversation. I don't want to confuse the 2.9 billion versus that 300 million for fisheries. So we want to keep those conversations separate.
Right. So we want let me feel that that 50 million should be divided up at least half with us, because we manage half the resources.
I would agree. So, and that may be an AWT letter. I'm not sure. Tom Wooten has been pushing the envelope of restructuring the AWT. Brian was the president, and now he's not on the council. So we need to figure out what we're going to do about the AWT organization.
Yeah, because right now it's just you and I. Is that right?
Yeah, I get. Yeah, that makes me nervous. It makes everybody else.
I know.
Yeah. Who's going to break
like
the tie?
30 some years ago.
All right, guys, we're going to have to go ahead and cut this short, because not cut it short. We need to cut her off. We've been at it for 2 hours. I know you guys have other calls you got to get on. So I'll check that email, and we'll work on an agenda to kind of reflect some of the things we talked about here at the end. We probably need to put the CARES Act update on fisheries on the agenda next time, Terry.
Yeah, we just couldn't fit it in today. We wanted to. Okay, and then James has posted Coquell's press release there in the chat box, and also Nicole said the Corona Relief Fund can be used for the FEMA match. So, and if you have any questions, her email is right there.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Everybody. Did anybody need any more information out of the chat box?